Hi, Ajitha.
Good
Can't hear
evening.
you, Ajitha.
Hope I'm audible.
Ah, now you're audible. Yeah. We'll let in participants only at 4, huh? Not before that. Siddesh? Siddesh, are you there?
Yes, Jason.
Yeah, yeah. We've let in participants, right? We'll let
That's
Uh,
in participants only at 4 o'clock. Okay.
yeah,
Ajitha, have you tested your audio and everything? You have a video to show, right?
me. Yes,
You
I'm
have,
just
you have an
ready.
audio or a video also to play, right? Have you
Yes.
tested that?
Uh, can we go over it once for a minute? You can tell me if it is audible.
Yeah.
Yes, so let me just share my screen. Yes, Jayashri. Are you able to see the slides now?
Yeah, I'm able to sleep. Yeah. You
Just
want to
test.
play that audio also once?
I'll just do that. Is it audible?
No.
Not even now.
No.
I believe I need to select something to ensure that the audio.
Yeah. So you have to in Zoom when you're sharing, no, when you're sharing screen, at the bottom there'll be one share audio. You'll have to click on that. Stop sharing and share again. And when you share, and then you have to choose. You'll choose this PPT, no. At that
Yeah.
time, you'll have to choose audio.
There is share setting, host tools for share.
At the bottom, there'll be one share audio or something like that, which you have to select. Also, share tab audio will be there. When you're sharing, choose Chrome tab,
This entire screen is application window. Share sound. Share
share
option.
tab. If you click on that,
Share sound.
there'll be share tab.
Yes.
If you click on share tab, then at the bottom there'll be share audio, tab audio.
Uh, host tools for sharing. Actually, if you could just share your screen and guide me through the process, I think I'll be able to do that.
Okay, just a minute.
Yes.
Ma'am, you are too far from the computer, I guess. So your voice is too less.
I'll try turning off the fan and you can tell me that's better.
Siddesh,
Uh,
can you just share screen and show Ajita how to share audio?
Is that
uh,
better? Am I audible? Is the voice better?
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
now,
audible.
Okay.
I'm having a little low bandwidth, so it's just kind of going, but then that's why I'm not able to share. I may not be able to. If you can share for Ajita and show, no? Siddesh?
can you click on a shares?
Can you please share your screen and guide me?
Uh, I don't have your PPT.
Oh, the sound. I'll just share it. You walk me through. So I'll have to open my PPT first.
No, you have to first say share screen. On the Zoom interface,
Yes.
you've done share screen.
I have chosen the application window. I'm going to share it now. Now you walk me through what I need to do.
Click
No,
on a
you
site.
this is the this
PPT.
is the PPT, right? Yeah. So you've chosen the PPT to be shared, right?
Yes. No, I chose the application window.
Can you say share tab, Chrome tab?
I am not able to see that provision here. It's all right. I think rest of the things are visible, so it's all right. I think even if I'm not able to, share the audio file.
Can you share your screen and show us the video we can try?
Yes, I'll do that.
Hello everyone, my name is Darren and I'm a student.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is audible for you, right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Because previously you not shared with slideshow, that's why it is not audible. So,
Oh, got it.
yes.
So I have to make sure that it is on slideshow for the audio file to be audible. Got it.
Yeah.
It will be on slideshow only. Got it.
ठीक है.
So there are some advanced option as well. If you want to your screen on that PPT, you can add with the advanced setting. So
Okay.
there will be option to share screen and the advanced. There will be option where how you can present yourself or your PPT. So you can
Yes, I'm going to choose the one which will have this dual option. I'll do that.
okay.
I'm going to do.
So yeah. So Jayashree, people are in waiting room now.
Yeah, what's the time?
Transfer them
Now
to the waiting room.
we can admit them. 2 minutes left. No, we can admit them now.
Should I add them now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hello and good evening, and welcome to the community of practice. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes more. People are still joining in. I know it's exactly 4 o'clock. Let's wait for a couple of minutes more. And would request people to keep their audios off, keep yourself on mute. And it'll be lovely to have you on video, though. We would love to see your faces. It'll be nice to put a face to the names that we see. Um, so, yeah, but request the audio to be on mute. Oh, hi, I can see Maheshwari. Hi, Maheshwari. How are you? Nice to see you today. Good evening,
Ma'am, how are you, ma'am?
Maheshwari. Yeah, very good. Nice to see you. Wow, nice. You're still in office.
No, ma'am, I came home. From
You
home,
came
I'm
home?
attending. Yeah,
Okay, wonderful.
thank
Nice
you,
to
ma'am.
see you. Welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, good evening, Geeta. All right. Hi, Nasreen. Nice to see you. Kavita,
Hello,
Sharon, nice
ma'am.
to
Good
see you.
afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. Lot of people still joining in. Hi, Seema. What a delight to see you, Seema. Nice.
Hi.
Okay, it's 4:02. I think we'll start while the others begin to join. So, very warm welcome to today's community of practice session. It's nice to see people who are like-minded, educators, school leaders who want to learn from one another, want to support one another, coming onto this platform. And this platform has only been becoming stronger than ever before. So, a little bit about Adhyayan and the community of practice, because I see a few new joinees today. So, Adhyayan Quality Education Services is a social enterprise which works in the field of education, and we are about 12, 13 years old since we started. We basically do a lot of we do school reviews, which are collaborative in nature, which are basically quality assurance for schools. We also do a lot of professional development for teachers, for school leaders, and anybody who's a stakeholder in the field of education schools. The community of practice was started in April 2020 during the pandemic, when schools went online. And when we realized that there were many schools in the country who were grappling with how to do online education, how to do online teaching, how to do online assessments, while we had a lot of our own partner schools who we had been working with were already very well versed with technology. They were already into blended learning much before the pandemic even came. So we thought that we should get these schools to support the ones which needed support. And from then on, this platform, every Saturday, we've been having this. And so the topics for these sessions are all very relevant to teaching and learning. And we've had facilitators coming from all over the country and even from abroad, participating in this on this platform to share their best practices with others. So, like that. And today we have a very, very enthusiastic and a very hardworking teacher who is going to share her best practices, some things that she has tried out in her classrooms, which has worked. And of course, along with that, she will also talk to us about what were some small little niggles that she had and how she worked around those to make these practices even more effective in her class with her students. So, a little bit about Ajita before I hand over the mic to her. Ajita is a passionate educator with over 15 years of experience in the field of education. Her teaching career spans three deeply interconnected domains: English language teaching, life skills, and teacher training. Over the years, Ajita has had the privilege of working with learners across different levels and backgrounds, guided always by one core belief that education is not merely about content delivery, it is about transformation. It is about igniting curiosity, building confidence, and nurturing the kind of thinking that stays with the student long after they have left the classroom. Alongside her teaching career, Ajita is also a writer and a reflective practitioner. With nearly 60 articles published across reputed educational magazines and journals like Teacher Plus, Mentor, and The Progressive Teacher, she has regularly contributed to the broader conversation around education. Her writings span a wide range of themes, from innovative teaching methodologies and reflective practices to student engagement, strategies, and the integration of life skills into everyday curriculum. Through both her teaching and her writing, Ajita's mission has remained constant to support the professional growth of fellow educators and to champion the holistic development of students. Believer that when teachers grow, students flourish. This conviction continues to drive everything she does. And I think a little bit about my personal experience with Ajita. I've known Ajita for nearly 3 years now, and I can vouch for the fact that she's an extremely hardworking and an enthusiastic teacher. She's highly reflective and is only keen on improving her practices day by day and making it better. So thanks Ajita for accepting this offer to kind of come on the platform and talk to our audience. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Jayashree, for that beautiful introduction and your personal feedback. It's a privilege and an honor to be here on this platform of community of practice, not a workshop or presentation, but a community of practice, and that is what attracted me to this platform because I'll just share my screen and we will begin. Something has gone wrong. Just give me a minute if I'm able to fix that.
Yeah, you have to share your screen. It came on
Yes.
briefly.
And yes, just a minute.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure Ajita will like this session to be interactive. So please keep your chat freely flowing. Keep typing on the chat, and she might want to once in a while stop and ask you to unmute yourselves and speak. And so I think the more questions that come, the more we will learn. And of course, we will have a last about 10 minutes time for question answer itself. And that's how she's planned it. So, but we really request you to keep the chat flowing.
Yes, I believe my screen has come alive now.
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Okay. What I'm going to share today is a work in progress. It's not a finished success story. These are practices that I've been experimenting with in my classrooms in the recent past. So if you're hoping to take away a perfect model to replicate, I might disappoint you. But if you're hoping to see what honest classroom experimentation looks like and pick up a few ideas that you would like to try it out in your own classrooms, then I think we are going to have a very rich conversation today. I want to start with a simple question, and I would like you to think about it for a moment. You don't have to answer it out loud. Think about one assessment you have given your students recently. Any assessment. Now ask yourself, did it tell you something you didn't already know about your students? Did the assessment capture something you don't already know about your students? Now, for a long time, for me, the answer to this question has been a big no. Because my tests confirmed what I already suspected. The students I thought were strong did well in my assessments. The ones I was worried about continued to struggle. And somewhere in the middle, a large group of students sat, not failing, not excelling, but completely invisible to the assessment system. That discomfort, that nagging feeling, that what I was measuring wasn't the same as what my students actually knew, started me on this journey. So that is what I'm offering today. Not a model, not a prescription, just one teacher's experience of trying to make assessment mean something more. Today, I will walk you through 3 strategies in the course of next 40 minutes or so. 3 strategies that I've been exploring in my classrooms: choice boards, projects, and tiered assignments. And then I want to hear from you what you have been trying, what stuck with you, what surprised you. The Q&A session that we will have towards the end is something that I'm really looking forward to. Now, let me start with a bit of context because I think it matters. Like most schools, my school also has standard assessment practices. We have periodic tests, we have midterm tests, we have annual examinations. And on paper, they are working. But there was something uncomfortable I kept noticing. When I look at a class of 30 students and realize that the same handful were doing well and the same handful were struggling, and the summative assessments that we were administering weren't really illuminating why or doing much to change that. That is when I started exploring differentiated instruction more seriously. The question I kept asking myself was, am I measuring what students know, or am I measuring how well they do a particular task? Because those two are not the same. And Indian education system is notorious for doing the second, that is testing students on how well they are able to execute a particular task or a test item. So differentiated assessment is the idea that students should have multiple ways to show their understanding. Not because we are lowering standards, but because we are recognizing that different students have different strengths. The core learning goal remains the same for every learner. Only the pathway to demonstrate it that varies. But what looks elegant in a framework can feel a little chaotic when you actually implement in the classroom. That's been my experience. But I've kept going because I have seen it transform the engagement level of students who previously felt invisible in a conventional assessment system. One of the many ways I try to offer differentiation in my class is through choice board activities. Now, choice board is a menu of tasks. So instead of every student in the class doing the same assignment, students can choose from a range of activities that are designed around different intelligences and learning styles. The goal is the same. Every student needs to demonstrate their understanding of the lesson, but how they do that can look very different from student to student. Now remember, all these assessment strategies that I'm sharing with you today are formative in nature, because ultimately, whatever we may like to say, we are not in a position to overhaul the education system that is in place and that seems to be working for a country like us. But what we can do in our classroom is experiment with different formative assessments. That is very much in our hands, very much in our control. So let me walk you through how I do that in my classroom with an example from a class 10th text. Class 10th English communicative course is what we do at our school. There is this poem that most of you must be familiar with, either as students or perhaps if you're English teachers. It's a classic gem from Coleridge. So after teaching the poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, I offered students 8 different kinds of activities that they could choose from instead of a standardized assignment that I used to give earlier. Now, a student who loves writing, who has a flair for writing, could try diary entry from the mariner's perspective. One who thinks in patterns could create a timeline of emotional shifts that we are able to see in the mariner through the course of part 1 and part 2 of the poem. And someone who processes visually could illustrate the albatross and its symbolism, which is central to the poem. A student who connects through personal experience could opt to write a reflection on guilt. The range went all the way till designing an interactive story maps for the students. Now, what I saw, and this genuinely surprised me, was that students who had been quite disengaged when the poem was being transacted in the class suddenly found an entry point into the poem that felt relevant to them, only because they were able to choose an activity that they were naturally inclined or gravitated towards. And it offered them a pathway to demonstrate their learning in a way that makes sense to them and the way that comes naturally to them. Benefits of offering choice boards are plenty. First, it gives them autonomy. The sense of student agency is exemplified in choice board activities. They're more invested because they have made a choice. There was also a kind of natural differentiation happening when students are given with a range of activities or tasks to choose from. Students, without being told, I observed, gravitated towards tasks that match their readiness and confidence levels also, not just their interest levels. Now, here is what I did not anticipate. And these are things that all educators would benefit, keeping in mind when you are designing the choice board activities and offering it to your students. Now, some students I found were paralyzed when they were asked to choose. Because remember, we are talking about students who are so used to the teacher making the choice for them all the time. So suddenly ask them to, pick an activity, they don't know how to go about it. There were instances where few students had taken more than a week to decide when the deadline was to submit the artifact in a week's time. So sometimes that can defeat the purpose. There is way to address this as well. So let me first talk about what are the areas of concerns, and then we will discuss how we can address these, because these are bound to come. I also discovered that some tasks were more time consuming than others, and I had not accounted for that the first time that I introduced it to them. Now, a student, for example, who chooses to do interactive story map can take 3 or 4 times longer than a child who decides to do a diary entry. And then there is also assessment consistency. How do you fairly evaluate a diary entry against a graphical analysis? I struggled with that initially, but then there are ways that we can address that if we plan properly. What I intended, this was when I introduced this for the first time. These were the challenges that I encountered. And based on the feedback and based on the learning that I have been able to acquire, uh, it was planned differently. It was refined when I did it for the second cycle. And what I intend to do differently now is to limit the options and categorize them roughly based on the time requirement, that is a time requirement to complete the task. And also work on a rubric that focuses on assessing their understanding rather than being very format specific. So that was something that I did not do the first time I designed the rubric, and that's the reason why I had to revise it a lot of times. Felt honest. And it will also be a good idea to have a discussion with the students and guide them, nudge them, gently into making the right choice. Because you will also observe that students, who are good at illustration may end up choosing the same kind of activity over and over again. A child who is good at, who's artistically inclined could also have verbal intelligence. So the teacher has to be very mindful and also observe if you are able to see an overall pattern in the way the students are making choices, and ensure that you are able to intervene as and when required to ensure that students are able to explore multiple different activities that may cater to different intelligences that they have. Now let's talk about projects. If choice boards give students autonomy in how they demonstrate understanding, projects go little further in giving the ownership of the entire inquiry in their hands. Now, when they take up projects, they're not just choosing a task like choice boards. They are generating questions, they are researching, they're constructing meaning and sharing it with an audience. And this requires a longer period of engagement, unlike the choice boards, which could be done in a period of, it depends on the nature of the task and the deadline that the teacher sets, but ideally within a week's time, it can be done. But projects will take longer. When I introduced the project for the first time, the timeline that I had given to students spanned about a month and a half. Now I'll illustrate that using an example. I designed a project around this story called A Dog Named Duke from class 9th English curriculum in the communicative English course. Now, to begin with, the students had to first choose what aspect or what theme specifically that, there are many themes that are embedded in the story. What is one particular theme that they connected with and they would like to explore further? The range of theme, there are different themes. So initially, the ideal way to go about project or selecting the theme is we give the choice to students. Since it was the first time that students were introduced to this approach, so I did the listing of themes and students had to decide which particular theme they would like to work for an extended period. And then they went through a structured step-by-step process that included framing the research questions, gathering resources, conducting research, analyzing the findings, and then making a presentation to the class. Now, the project also offered differentiation in the form of catering to the different learning profile of students by offering them a choice of whether they would like to do it as a group project or an individual project. So the individual projects also had various options like a choice board, but then this had to be delved deeper than the choice boards. The individual options were again differentiated as students could opt for journal writing, timeline, conducting an interview, and it went all the way to, even composing an original soundtrack for the story. I will share towards the end of the presentation a background score that one of the students actually was able to compose, and what showcasing of that final artifact felt like in the class. Now, to talk about things that we need to consider when we are planning to introduce a project in the classroom, the very first thing that comes to the mind is the time constraint. Now, I introduced this project to my students as an extended learning, and I could devote only a few classes for discussions in the classroom initially, and the other stages were executed after the school hours, where students met online and continued to work on their chosen project. So that is one way I address the constraint of time. It was not something that students engaged in the class during the school hours, though the initial discussions selection was facilitated, but the rest of the project was executed after school hours. Students would physically get together, or sometimes they met online and they executed the other stages of the project. Another concern, like the choice board, was this is a different challenge. That was unequal participation in group that was visible. I was able to detect that only at the time of presentation. In most groups, I later found out, there was one student who did all the heavy lifting, and there were others, who hardly made any contribution. So that made me realize the importance of building frequent check-in with students as they are, undertaking the project. Though I had made the project with many deadlines, and I had a mechanism to track the progress of the project, but then I realized later that I should have had a provision to ensure that the participation was also equal among all the students in the group. And another discovery that I made was, not all students are ready for self-directed learning. And this was really very humbling to acknowledge, because I had assumed that given freedom, all students would flourish. But some needed more scaffolding than I had provided. As I mentioned, though I did break the PBL in the project into different phases with many deadlines, but it was not with specific checkpoints at every phase. So in the next cycle, I intend to use individual reflection logs alongside group work to ensure that there is a record of every student's contribution in the process of undertaking the project. Now, while projects ensure engagement and authentic learning if they have done it sincerely, it is equally important to assess students' readiness levels. And this is where tiered assignments come into play. Tiered assignments are based on a simple idea. Same learning objective, but different levels of complexity. Now, all students are working towards the same goal, but the task is calibrated to the level of their readiness. A beginner level task. Now we know that we have different kinds of learners in our classrooms. Not every child in any given class has attained the minimum level of learning, or has internalized everything that is expected of a child of that particular age. For various reasons, there are students who fall behind, who continue to fall behind if we do not acknowledge and provide for such children. And that is where tiered assignments are very helpful. So when you finish a lesson, when you complete a topic, we usually give tests or independent practice. But the regular practice is give the same standard test for all the students, irrespective of whether they have attained the learning objective or not. What happens when we continue to do this is, students who are falling behind, they're falling behind for a reason. Perhaps they have given up at one point because they have never been able to experience what success looks like for them. They have never been able to score an impressive, score in any test. So they feel that, I don't know, there may be many reasons for that. There could be a huge learning gap, there could be a learning disability, and sometimes it could even be a lack of motivation. So when we implement tiered assignment, we start this practice of giving tiered assignments where we calibrate the test items. Again, I'm talking about formative assessments. When we do this as a class test or independent practice, we can have the same set of standard questions, but then we can layer it for the three different types of learners that we can have in class. Ideally, we need to be able to personalize, learning pathways, but we know in a class of 30 to 40, it is not possible. Differentiation is the next best thing. So we categorize students for our understanding, not to be made explicit to the students. We categorize them for into three broad categories: students who are doing, average, and then students who are gifted, and students who are falling behind. So the same standard test item that you have been giving to your students, you can continue to give that to the average learners. But we need to offer some kind of scaffolding that is inbuilt in the test item for students who are left behind, and also add an element of challenge for students who are attempting the same set of questions, but an additional component that calls for application of that, in real world situation or scenario. So that is one way and differentiate the test items in our class as formative assessment. Another way is to have three different sets of tasks calibrated to the three different levels of our learners. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about tiered assignments. I'm talking about three sets of worksheets or test items that we administer to gauge the attainment of learning objective after the end of a unit, before the summative assessment takes place. Now the idea is, when you're providing that scaffolding, I'm talking about students who are falling behind. In language, it could be in the form of sentence starters, sentence prompts, help words. In mathematics, it could be solve the example with a different numerical for something that will help the child figure out how he or she is supposed to attempt that problem. This will definitely help the child at least complete the test, which he or she may have never been able to do that. So that sense of achievement of having been able to complete the task for the first time, perhaps after you introduce, tiered assignments in the class, will definitely boost the confidence levels of, such students. Because most of the time, students who fall behind are the ones who are demotivated mainly because they've never been able to taste success. So this is one way to these kind of students to experience a sense of success. But the idea is that we slowly and gradually build their confidence to the point that we that they can carry out the same task independently, and we withdraw the support system, but only after we feel that there is a level of learning attainment or some kind of growth. So the idea is that it has to be withdrawn eventually, but till that point that the child has the feeling of accomplishment, this has to be done. And again, we have another set of students in our class, gifted ones, who would complete the same test items, in maybe half the time that the rest of the class takes, and they are disengaged. So again, the teacher has to be very mindful in making sure that these children are also adequately challenged. The idea of differentiation is to be able to challenge students in adequate amounts. It should not be too overwhelming, and it should not be too simple. So for that, differentiation is very important so that all kinds in our classrooms are engaged. Now, why this tiered assessments, work, or tiered assignments work, I've just illustrated. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which takes you through some areas of concern that you are bound to encounter when you are introducing this for the first time. This is something that I encountered when I introduced tiered assignments to my students for the first time. Now, the first problem, if I can call it so, was stigmatization. So if we are not very subtle about differentiation, it can be seen as discrimination. We need to ensure that we are able to make the students understand that differentiation is actually something that is helping them and not labeling them. And this concern is also bound to come from the parents when they see their children being given a different set of tasks if you are going about the three tiered assignments. So I try to address that by, I first categorize the worksheet, the tiered assignments at set A, set B, set C. And then, one way to kind of destigmatize the process was label them as challenge levels. And if you give the autonomy to the students to choose the particular set of tasks that they would like to pick up, again, it becomes an invitation rather than an imposition. So that is one way we can address the problem of stigma that comes with, carrying out differentiation through tiered assignments without proper groundwork. Now, what I've come to believe is that tiered assignments work best when they're embedded in a classroom culture that already celebrates different kinds of intelligences. Now, it comes from the culture that the school is trying to, create. If students have been told all year long, explicitly or implicitly, that there are more ways to be smart, differentiation seems like a natural extension to it. So if tiering arrives with that kind of groundwork, it will not feel like labeling. And that is one thing that I'm still working on. Because when we make it a whole school approach, we have to ensure that it is done with proper planning and execution, and also with the mechanisms to build these problems that the school is bound to encounter. Yeah, so another way that we can address this, labeling problem or stigma that is associated is to use flexible grouping. Usually when we give the tiered assignments, we group students based on their ability. So same ability students get to do, the same level of assignments. But then you can also experiment with flexible grouping when you give the choice to the students. So they get to choose which particular set of, questions they would like to, take up or attempt. And if you are making sure that you have a provision to rotate the groups and also have heterogeneous groups where the one who has attained concept mastery can help the child who is still struggling, perhaps peer learning would be something that will take away the stigma that comes with very rigid categorization and teachers not giving that choice to students. So that is one way. Another way that we can address, some problems that we may anticipate when we are doing this for the first time. Now, none of these choice boards, projects, or tiered tasks, they mean much. Feedback that students get do not actually help them understand, where they are and what are the next steps that they need to take. And so I started working more deliberately with the three tools, namely learning intentions, success criteria, and rubric. A learning intention is a clear statement of what students are expected to learn. It is different from learning objective because the learning objective only states what the destination is. whereas learning intention is like giving you a roadmap. The emphasis is on the process rather than the product. So that's a slight difference that we have from learning objective and learning intention, though most educators would ask you not to bother with the nomenclature as long as you're able to make sure that you are able to you're able to spell out the process that students are expected to undergo when you're introducing a topic for the first time, and what the teaching learning process would look like. Success criteria is breaking the learning intent into small measurable steps. And to give you some examples, a statement like, I'm learning to construct a persuasive argument, or I'm going to, as opposed to, I am going to write a speech. Are you able to see the difference? The learning intentions, the success criteria, statement is spelling out what exactly the student would do and how he or she would ensure that he has attained that objective. Rubric, on the other hand, lists the different criterias that will be used to evaluate a particular piece of writing if it is a language activity, and it also gives out clear descriptors of different levels of attainment of what success looks like. So I use a judicious mix of both success criteria, checklist, and also rubric whenever there is any independent or original work that students attempt. Every original work attempted by the student should be evaluated against a set of criteria, and the feedback should be based on the list of success criteria or the rubric that is shared with the students much in advance. It should not be done post-mortem, because success criteria and rubric is like a roadmap that students can keep referring to when they are attempting a particular test item, so that they can keep referring, and it's like a checkpoint for them to keep checking whether they are able to keep to the task, what the expectations are, and how well they're able to achieve or attain those objectives that is spelled out clearly in the success criteria statements. I've also used success criteria for self-assessment and peer assessment, not just for my own marking. And one thing that I observed is when we use the same rubric or success criteria checklist with students for peer assessment, they develop their own critical eye and they understand the criteria much more deeply if they are trained to use the same set of criteria or rubric to assess a peer. This I was able to witness when I used a well-defined rubric, which I was able to source from the internet. And we used the criteria as a class. My role was minimal. I only moderated, the observation and the score that students gave to their peers after witnessing their presentation. Now I will take you through some samples of choice board student artifacts, rubrics that I have designed for the various tasks that students are assessed on. So let me first show you this document that is used as a learning resource to teach debate writing in class 11. So we begin by spelling out clearly what the learning intention is when we tell them that this is what we are going to do over a period of 3 to 4 days, or maybe even a week, depending upon how long it takes for students to master this. So if you look at the statement, to critically engage with the topic of debate, the keyword is critically engage, structure strong arguments, and persuade the audience through clear, logical reasoning and evidence. I hope you are able to see the difference in how the learning intention is articulated versus what is given as learning objective in various documents. So here the emphasis is on what the students will be able to do or should be able to do in the process of learning the nuances of this particular writing skill. So this is the learning intention, and then the learning intention is broken down into small measurable steps that will act as a checkpoints for students to keep referring to when they are actually sitting independently to craft a debate. So if you look at the criteria, I can clearly state my position on the topic and explain my main argument. I can use relevant evidences, examples, and facts to support my argument. I can anticipate opposing views and address them in my writing, and so on. And next, we model what attainment of this success criteria looks like for each of the success criteria statements. For example, when you talk about how you can clearly state your position, so this is a sentence that fulfills that criteria. For example, in this sentence, I believe, so for example, if the topic is intrinsic motivation, so the opening statement could be, I believe intrinsic motivation is the most effective way to remain disciplined because it comes from within, leading to a long lasting commitment. External rewards or punishments may provide short-term motivation, but they don't foster true self-discipline, which is sustained by internal drive. So this introduction, satisfied this criteria of clearly stating your position on the topic and explaining your main argument. Likewise, for every success criteria, there is a sample sentence or a paragraph that models what a good writing looks like and how each of these criteria are fulfilled. And then we give them how the entire debate can be structured, what are the different components, and then how these criteria are met, and then the final sample debate. Now, after this is done in the class, we also give students time to practice. Usually the practice is we mat and maybe in a class or two, and then we ask them to write a debate and practice. So here is where guided practice comes into play. So ideally, instead of making students write the entire debate after you have just introduced the task to them, if we can provide opportunity for students to come together in small groups and master each component of a particular complex task, and then finally attempt the independent practice, that has shown to be really very helpful. So when you are teaching debate writing, for example, it could span the entire process than a week, because you are giving them opportunity to model each component first, how to start your opening statement, maybe a class, and then what are the final what are the arguments that you're going to make after choosing your stand, and what are the counter arguments that you need to anticipate and also provide rebuttal for that. So if we are chunking the entire skill or a task, providing this guided practice is like, if I were to use an analogy, like a safety net before they are thrown into the deep end of the pool and asked to attempt it entirely on their own. So this is one way that we introduce success criteria. We model what good looks like before students are encouraged to carry it out themselves independently. There are several other examples. This is the student presentation rubric that I was referring to earlier. This is something that I got from the internet, which I was able to modify a little. And this is exhaustive. It's very comprehensive. And the experience that I've had with my class 11 students when they use this to assess their peers' presentation was very insightful. Students, admitted that when they had, spelled out criteria and descriptors, they were very conscious of how they need to look into various aspects of the presentation, and the feedback that they received was also very very objective, because they had a document that spelled out what they need to look for when they are viewing their peers presentation and give their feedback based exclusively on the criteria, and they should be able to justify why they think that a particular child falls under this particular level. It was just developing and not proficient for this particular criteria. So I have seen how the class dynamics changes when you introduce success criteria and also rubric to give feedback on students work. It can be used for self-assessment, peer assessment, and of course the teacher assessment. And that is how we could also fulfill CBSE's mandate about the holistic report card, which should have an element of self-assessment, peer assessment, along with teacher assessment. This is another rubric for a subject enrichment activity in class 9, radio show presentation. Now, the idea is these rubric and success criteria checklists are to be shared with the students in advance and not be given after they attempt a particular task. We have this success criteria checklist for every independent practice that we give to our students in all our classes. If I were to take class 9, for all the lesson, we have a set of questions that are different from the ones that are given in the textbook. So we discuss the questions that are given at the end of the lesson, but then our independent practice questions are different. And as we design our independent practice tasks or test items, we simultaneously work on the success criteria statements, checklist, or the rubric. As I mentioned earlier, we have a judicious mix of both rubrics as well as success criteria that helps us give feedback on students' work whenever there is independent practice or tests that we conduct for our students. I think I have taken more time than I anticipated, so I'm going to stop here because I think there should be room for question and answer. So I'll stop here.
Okay, that was brilliant, Ajitha. A lot of hard work, and yeah. So yeah, the floor is open now. Anybody wants to any thoughts? Share your thoughts. Ask any questions for clarification.
I see Nirmala raising her hand.
Yes, Nirmala.
Hi, Jayashree. Hi, Ajitha.
Hi,
Thank you for
Nirmala. Nice to see you.
yeah, long time.
Yeah, long time.
Uh, Ajitha, I had a question. It's not actually a question, it's more of an observation because we were, as a school, looking at how we can look at assessments, especially from standard 7 onwards. And we have found last year that most of our kids, they're now so AI friendly that most of these projects or things that we give them, more often than not, it's been a work of, not theirs, but the chat GPTs that are helping them out. Any kind, whether you take it as a history project or social sciences, language. So as a school, we are studying and then somehow when we see, there's a trend. You need to be a little smarter than the AI for, the kids to tell them that, this is not the original work. But when you look at assessment, somehow I feel these projects that we give them, or if we give them the options, how is our school and what should we do where we can come out of this AI doing the work for our kids? Because this is a challenge we found last year, that whatever projects we are giving, whatever assessments we are giving, any kind of a debate, everything happens to be at a faster pace with AI helping them out. And of course, the presentation, all that is theirs. But when you look at the content and everything, we felt that this is one challenge that our school was not ready with.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. It is actually a universal problem. So I'll give you an example of how I deal with, I'll give you an example from class 11. So we have this ALS project that we need to get our students to do. So same problem I encountered last year. I found that the projects were so beautifully, crafted. But then, when there is the Viva component, and that you realize that everything that was so beautifully put together was not original work. So what I did this year, I mean the session that just got over now, was to ensure that students did all the writing work. They have to
In the class.
make a 1,000 word essay, right? The final product for the project portfolio. All that happened in the class. So that was one way I ensured that everything that went into the project file, the portfolio, was actually written by students and it was not AI generated. There are a lot of ways that we can actually consciously ensure that we are only getting original work from students. Even choice boards, they need not be very complicated or sophisticated. Something that students will be able to demonstrate in a period of 30 to 40 minutes is good enough. The idea is that we are giving multiple pathways for students to demonstrate their mastery of a given content in ways that comes very naturally to them. So a child who's naturally good, artistically inclined, will not require more than 30 minutes, maybe conceptualize a scene from a given story or poem and depict that as his or her artifact, when we are introducing choice boards. So these are some ways that I have tried to address, plagiarism and AI generated content to prevent students. And that is why this year, we are emphasizing more on independent practice tasks that we give to our students in the school under the supervision of the students. And there are various ways in which there are different activities, there are different platforms, digital platforms, where we can think of giving a homework that is very creative. For example, we did this activity, we had this activity for class 9 and 10, where they had to pick a character from a story and come up with a monologue trying to explain the story from that character's perspective. So the dialogue writing happens in the class. Is only that because it is not possible for the teacher to let all the students present their monologues in the class. We have time is a major constraint, so the digital platform was used to record their monologues that were originally written. And teacher will have these artifacts that she may evaluate for content mastery, or for whatever criteria it is that you set to assess students, or whatever criteria it is that you're evaluating students.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
great.
hope the question in some way.
Thanks, Ajit.
Seema, you want to ask?
Yeah, hi. First of all, again, like Jayashree, I want to really thank you for this session. It was very, very thorough and it was outstanding. A very useful 1.5 hours I spent today, I would say. My question, I mean, I am more into mentoring kids and not really teaching children. So my question was about the stigmatization that you spoke about. So I have dealt with a child who was particularly not good in mathematics, and I encouraged her to take painting as a subject in 11th and 12th. And she spoke a lot about the stigmatization. She was extremely good in painting, and I had to like really work on her for a year to take that as a subject in 9th and 10th. And she did extremely well, in fact, getting centum in painting. But throughout the time, she kept on talking about how bad it was for her in the class, because every time she left for the painting class, her peers would make fun of her, saying that, it was almost equated to some kind of for a lack of a better word, a disability, that she was not able to handle a so-called, streamlined subject, and had to take an optional subject because she was not good at it. So could you elaborate a little more on the stigmatization, and when you do a differentiation in terms of the assessment how exactly, I mean, parents are one part of it. What about the peer stigma which they go through?
Now, I just want you to, hypothesize a situation. Imagine the same child had these, choice board activities, consciously built in different subjects that allowed her to demonstrate, her understanding. Because sometimes it's not that students don't understand, but maybe, the format of the examination in such that it does not allow the child to express his or her understanding or mastery in a way
Yes.
that comes naturally. So if such systems, if such activities and approaches are part of the assessment, formative assessment scheme, then I don't think the child would have experienced that. Perhaps the child never got an opportunity to present her understanding in a way that comes very naturally to her. So that is
So
one way
I,
we could,
yeah, but you are
ensure.
also handling the senior students, right? From what I gather, you also take classes from 9 to 12th, right?
Yes.
So, wouldn't that be quite acute by the time they come into ninth standard because they've not gone through something like this earlier?
Yes, and that is why it is important that we start thinking about integrating this from as early as possible, right from the
Yeah,
primary classes. I'll give you an
yeah.
example, from the project that I gave it to the students of class 9. There was one child, he is in class 10 now, who is very good at music, but is a very quiet, very reticent child. You will hardly will be able to elicit any response from him until you press him too much. But through the project, he was able to, compose a background score for the story, and he had spent hours on, doing that. He gave me a number which I'm not able to recall, the number of times he had to edit the final composition. And when that was played in the class, he got a standing ovation. A child who had been invisible all these years suddenly got his 15 minutes of fame. And imagine what that would have done to boost the child's motivation.
Absolutely.
So it is through such differentiation and such
So,
strategy that we embed that we are able to make children feel some kind of success that will ultimately result in better motivation, and that will be able to that in turn will help the child be maybe motivated to do a little more for him or her to be able to show improvement in academic subjects that the child has not been able to show excellence or success in.
absolutely. So, I guess even here, maybe the teacher should have played a bigger role, encouraging the fact that your faculty is towards a creative area and there was no stigma attached to that, and maybe educate peer students about it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I remember also Ajita saying that it's a culture that should be set, right? And if it's supposed
Absolutely,
to be
absolutely.
culture, then that is really the best.
And the
And
culture is
yeah,
really
so children
to
need
happen.
to be, you need to speak to children about diversity, diverse learning styles, and I remember I've read even in Carol Tomlinson, who is the guru for differentiation, I would say. She's written so many books, she's done so many seminars and workshops. So in many of her books, she also talks about in her own class how she has brought in the culture, of learning, and then introduce differentiation in her classroom. So I think these are like very important. So it's not that children will not be able to understand, but we need to work on it, and then they will surely be able to kind of understand. Otherwise, yeah. So there are one or two questions. There is one. Karan Vyas has asked a question, Ajita. Just a question: giving various options to students to choose for a particular assessment will keep students in their comfort zone. But about challenging topics, will the child stay away from it? Like how to balance it out? Karan, if you're here, we would like to hear you. You want to articulate your question to Ajita? I
Yes,
don't know
ma'am.
if Karan is here. Karan, are you
Hello.
here? Yeah.
Hello, hello. Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
Yes.
ma'am, I just need to ask that if a child has an option to choose. So, particularly, a mindset of a child will be to choose the topic which is from their comfort zone, which is very nice, which is their good forte part. But sometimes, what will happen that if child will stay away from the challenging topics, so will how to balance it out so that a child overall skill development will not get uh, overall skill balance will not get anywhere. It should not get it should get justified everywhere, right? For that reason, just a question was there.
All right, I will try to address it with an example from my own classroom. First of all, I just want to clarify that choice board activities and the projects are not of different topics. They are aimed to test the same learning goal, but they are different pathways to demonstrate their understanding. So I had a child in class 9. I forgot to show the artifacts, but we don't have time. I just planned to do that earlier. But anyway, so there is a child who is very good with her words. She's a wordsmith, but she's equally good at illustrating. So when we started implementing choice board activities, when it became a regular feature in class 9, I was able to sense a pattern. The child continued to choose to illustrating than opting other options. So that is where I've covered that in my presentation as well. The teacher will have to intervene gently, nudging them, and there are also students who will not be able to decide what activity they should choose from. So we'll have to play a very proactive role in ensuring that children are exploring different pathways that they're equally good at. And also sometimes if they are choosing an activity that requires minimum investment in terms of time, we should be nudging them to take up something else that will be a little more challenging. So we as teachers will have to take a proactive role in ensuring that we are our children are getting adequate challenge in terms of where they are and catering to their interests and readiness levels at the same time.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Nirmala, you want to ask someone more?
Yes, please, if I may.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ma'am, I wanted to check with you. When we're talking about choice-based activities and all, supposing if we were to introduce it slowly in this academic year, could you help us with, step by step, since you have already done it? And we are the ones who would be, going on your footsteps. If you can just help us, you have told us the challenges. Of course, we will be mindful of those. But if you can just help us with step by step, especially how to get our teachers along with it, because we have to first introduce the idea, then get our teachers into all of us together, then start the process. So could you just help us a little bit on that, if you may, later?
Yeah,
Later.
sure. I actually have a collection of choice board activities that we had designed and implemented. Perhaps if you would like to stay back, I can, show you and, tell you how we went about doing that.
Sure. Thank you.
Great. So,
Ma'am, may I say something?
Yes,
I'm
Sandhya.
I just wanted to share my experience.
That's right. Okay, yes.
I just wanted to share my experience. I had done a project where the children had to watch some motivational videos and they had to share their opinion as partners. So when I gave them this activity, I realized that the children did not know how to frame that conversation. Means they did not know how to carry over the conversation. So when they were arguing or when they was giving their opinions, so I gave them some guidelines and I asked them to write down I gave them sentence beginners and I asked them to write down their dialogues and prepare it. And then I asked them to present it in front of their own classes. So they were very motivated and they loved this activity, since always I would give them a written activity. So they enjoyed this the most, speaking activity. And this also motivated the other children in the class who were not so good at it. So they also were motivated to come to the podium and share their opinions. So this was my success this year, and I plan to give them more such activities. And I want to implement man's idea for means we start when we begin the year, we give them a creative writing activity, which is a sort of competition, creative writing competition, where they can pick up any thing that learned, any writing skill they learned in the seventh class, to implement as a creative writing activity in the eighth class, eighth standard, when we start the year. So I'll certainly follow ma'am's directions, and I'll get back to you to report what were my successes in this. Thank you, ma'am.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nasreen. We would love to hear back from you.
Thank you.
And of course, Ajita will. And also, we would like to hear. So
But
please
I
do
don't
get
have
back.
any contact. I don't have your contact, ma'am.
You can always, okay, fine. I'll give you my contact. You have Adhyayan's email ID, right? The info ID.
Yeah,
You can always,
I'd received an invitation from the uh, on the mail.
yeah,
So could I
you can
use the
write
same
on that.
ID?
Can I speak?
Yes, you can write on that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Please do.
Ma'am, can I speak?
Who's that? Sandhya. Yes, Sandhya.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, Ajitha, ma'am. This is Sandhya here. My question is that could you slightly expand on the tieredness assignment section with respect to Standard 4 CBSE? A classroom sample piece would reflect upon explicitity and implicitity of this entire assignment would help us in a long way, more especially to the children who need more to accomplish success.
I would request you to perhaps rephrase your question. I'm sorry I wasn't able to
So
get
you
it.
want something for class 4, right? Is what you're saying, Sandhya?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. With the
Okay.
samples, it would be great.
Yeah. So I think Sandhya, you might want to either talk to Ajita a little later, because whatever she's done can be done for all grades. You just have to
Okay.
then kind of adapt it to your content, to the content of your grade that you're teaching, right? So
Okay.
these are whatever she's done. Choice boards or tiered assignments or projects are actually different methods of assessing, and it can be done for any grade, any chapter, any subject. Yeah, so you'll have to
Fine.
do the same thing and for your content. Yeah.
I can do one thing, Jayashree. I can share the, I mean, you already have the PPT and it has links to, all the samples. So if whoever wants it, it can be shared with them.
Yeah, so we can do that. So what we can do is on Monday, when you get your participation certificates, I'll tell Siddesh that he can also share the PPT with you all, so we can do that, certainly.
That would be great because I was only speaking in context to Standard 4. And if you
Mhm.
could help me with that, it would be really, really great.
Okay.
Yeah, as Jayashree said, we have this process of implementing all this from class 4 onwards. So whatever is applicable, whatever examples that I've given from ninth or 10th or 11th is applicable in class 4. And as she correctly pointed out, it is all about adapting it to the level of the learners, irrespective of, the classes. The
Yes.
activities can be, the approaches can be applied into any level, any class, any age of learners.
Thank
Right.
you, Jashri ma'am. Thank you, Ajita ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, Siddesh, can you just share the link for the feedback form? So we have, I think we can go on. There are many, we have only 13 minutes past 5, but I think, Ajita, the fact that, the whatever you shared is kind of, resonating with people and they want to try out, I think is the fact that, there are questions. And so, but we can't go on. But like I said, we can always share the PPT with you, and please do get back to Adhyayan, and then we can always put you in touch with Ajita if you don't have her contact. So we'll help you with that. So in the meanwhile, Siddesh, have you sent the link? Thank you, Siddesh. Siddesh has sent a link. It is a link for a Google form. It's for feedback. So please do fill this form and submit it. Um, please see that the name that you write in the feedback form is the name that you would like to see on your certificate. Please don't use short forms. Write the name that you want to be on the certificate. And those of you who fill the feedback form and submit it will be receiving the certificate on Monday or latest by Tuesday. And thank you, Ajitha. It was such a what do you say, an engaging and an enlightening session, I'm sure, for most of our participants here. And I think what was powerful is because you've tried it in your classroom and it straight comes out of your experience, right? And that's why it's so powerful. And more power to you, Ajita, to try more things like this and in your school. And I'm sure teachers like you are an asset to any school. Your school and your students are fortunate to have somebody like you. And thank you again for accepting this invitation to be the facilitator for a COP session. Thank you so very much. And thank you
I'm
to
just grateful for the
and
opportunity.
yes,
So thank you for giving me this opportunity to be able to reach out to many educators. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. And thank you to each one of our participants today. And on a Saturday afternoon, staying
Picture.
on after 5 o'clock just shows that we are also what do you say, we want to learn for our students. And that is why we are all like-minded and we don't mind, what do you say, foregoing our afternoon sleep on a Saturday afternoon on a weekend. Thank you so much. Yes, Siddesh, you said something.
Can everyone's on their camera so we can take one
Yeah,
picture?
we'll take a, if we can all switch on our videos, let's take a screenshot. Are you done? Are you done, Siddesh?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you to each one of you. And thanks to
Thank you,
Siddesh.
ma'am.
Siddesh is a silent worker behind the scenes who makes it possible for
And
us.
over.
Thank you, Siddesh. Yeah. Okay. I hope you've all opened the link, feedback form link. Siddesh, end the meeting now.
Thank you, Jayashree. I look forward to your feedback.
Thank you, Ajita. We'll get in touch.
Bye. Bye. Good day.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.